All right. I'll do this some editing later. Okay, here we go. All right. Welcome to Peter Breaks the Box, a channel where I endeavor to provide you some life skills that you likely will not receive anywhere else, or at least you won't receive it in the same place or all in the same place. This is based upon decades of legal experience, a psychology degree, being taught by some masters in body language, power dynamics, that kind of thing. These first sets of videos, they're going to be foundational. They're going to be setting the stage for future videos that will, where you need these foundational skills in order to put into place or exercise some of the skills that I want to teach you. So today, as part of our foundational teachings, I want to talk about power. It is something that people rarely think about except for in the most extreme of situations. And what do I mean? Well, every relationship has a power structure. Every single one. And that means interpersonal, significant other, friends, boss to employee, or vice versa, parent-child. Everything is a power structure, and where you fit into that power structure should be the guiding light for how you behave. With exceptions, of course. Be yourself when it comes to being a spouse or whatever, that kind of stuff. But regardless, and that power structure can change, and it constantly is changing. It's fluid. You may have a power position in one relationship at some point, and then you say or do the wrong thing, and that power position switches. It becomes weaker, becomes stronger. Well, what are some good examples? What do I mean by this? Well, let's take the example of a parent-child. And when I say child, let's start with a 2-year-old. Now, if I ask you who has the power in that relationship, the vast majority of parents are going to say, I do, without giving any thought to what that means. Because they just figure, I'm the authority figure here, I have absolute power, period, the end. Except it's not quite that simple. What does a 2-year-old have that you don't typically? What exercise of power can they utilize in order to flip the script or adjust your behavior? Well, they've got the power of the tantrum, don't they? They also have the power of persistence. Kids are known to be relentlessly persistent. And let's say, for example, that you're at home and you've established the appropriate parent-child relationship, or at least as appropriate as to your situation, and hopefully you've got some level of control, although toddlers are notoriously difficult. What happens when you go somewhere else? Well, they test you again. They test you again to see, does that same power dynamic apply everywhere else? And they will try it everywhere else. You going for a walk, they test you again. You maybe have the same tantrum they had an hour ago that was already resolved at home. You go to grandma's house. What happens? Test it again. Go to the grocery store. Test it again. And it's a constant test, and a lot of parents will simply fold at some point or find some way to shut the kid up in the hopes of reducing the tantrum or eliminating it. And for a lot of people, what that looks like is, let's say for the grocery store, that's a great example, because you lose a lot of power because what you don't want is in public making it look like possibly you're abusing the child. People are crazy, and you disciplining your child in public is oftentimes seen as abuse. So a lot of parents avoid doing that, or at least avoid doing it to the extent that they would at home. So what happens? Well, now that child knows that there are scenarios where you give up your power, and it sets the precedent. And now this is power that you can change that power position. You can change it up at some point in the future because you do have ultimate authority. But once you've conceded a portion of your power and you've given it over to that other person, in this case the toddler, you've made it so much more difficult to regain. So what are there some other scenarios? Well, I'm going to go straight to one that's near and dear to my heart. Being a lawyer and having a legal background, being in court way too often, especially on my personal custody case, there's a constantly shifting dynamic between me and the judges and the mediators. This is especially something, and this is something we will do a deep dive into in a later video. I can't do it now, but it's going to be probably in a few weeks. Most people, when they're facing a judge, and this typically you see this with self-represented parties, but you also see this with attorneys, they act on basic instinct. Pro se litigants, meaning litigants who represent themselves, oftentimes come from a place of emotion, especially if you're dealing with child custody. It makes perfect sense. You're emotional because this has to do with your kid and the damage the family court or your or the other parent may cause to your child as a result of what's going on. And they act from emotion, and there's a whole lot of problems with that. And for the purpose of this video, the primary issue is people don't understand where they are in the power structure. Now, a lot of people think judge has robe, judge has all the power. Yes and no. How you manipulate that will be dictated on where you are in terms of your relative strengths in the case. And to top it off, if you do have relative strength in the case and you say the wrong things, behave the wrong way, that can flip. It can flip now to you being from a powerful position to a weak position. And this can happen on a dime. I would snap my fingers, but hey, I actually, 51 years old, I can't snap. I think there's something wrong with my fingers. Anyway, so as an example, so I am constantly brought back to court for a custody battle by an ex who is out of this world obsessed with me. Our son is now almost 16. I am still being dragged back to court. Based upon my calculations, in the last 10 years, counting all court-related days, so that means court appearances, it means mediation, it means co-parenting therapy, anything that requires me to take away from my day as a result of a court order. So court-related days now exceed 100 in the last 10 years. By my calculations, I am being dragged to court on average every 3 weeks to 4 weeks. And judges are not doing a fucking thing to stop it. For any of you, sorry for the language, it's emotional. So, what power do I have? Well, again, this is something I'm going to do a deep dive into, but in the position I have set myself up in right now, I have the power to publicly say, in a video that is almost certainly going to end up in court in a few weeks, I can publicly say that Judge Hayes, Department 123 of the Sacramento Family Superior Court, which, as a quick aside, the Sacramento Family Superior Court is well known nationwide for being one of the most corrupt and incompetent in the nation. I'm not making that up. Look it up if you want to. So, Judge Hayes, I don't think he's evil. I do think he's got a large ego, and he is grossly incompetent. I will say that publicly, and I'm not going to say it as a matter of opinion. It is a matter of fact. His incompetence is out of this world. Why do I say that? Because he does not care about the United States or California Constitution's guarantees of due process. He routinely ignores them. And he does so under the mistaken pretext of, oh, I'm protecting the party's child. Well, yes, but at the same time, you took an oath to protect the Constitution. You have violated that oath more times than I can currently count. Judge Powell, I've forgotten which department he is. I think he's Department 124. Similar. He's guided heavily by emotions and biases. He also gives zero shits about constitutional due process. Again, this is something I'll go into greater detail, and I will probably be not divulging much of my personal case, because I really want you to be able to recognize the power dynamic for what it is. So why am I saying publicly that Judge Hayes and Judge Powell routinely violate due process and should be impeached and removed from the bench? Because I have made the conscious decision, based upon the current status of my case, to accept that I have the ability to make those statements. I have the law to back it up. They lack the competence to combat the law that I present to them. At the last hearing, for instance, before Judge Hayes, I laid into him for a solid 15 minutes. I was not held in contempt. Do you know why? Because I had every case, statute, rule of court, rule of judicial conduct in front of me. Every time Judge Hayes tried to sidestep my comments because he was not happy about the way I was talking to him, well, he would try it from a different angle. Well, every single different angle he tried to exert his authority, I had the counter legal authority for it. That put me in a relative power position that exceeded his. But he has the robe. Ultimately, he has the final say. And I had to make a determination based upon my analysis of that power structure of how I can behave based upon that, with also the understanding that there are consequences to my behavior, and I had to be ready to accept those consequences. Now, in the case of Judge Hayes and Judge Powell at the last hearings, they didn't realize that both of them behaved in exactly the manner I put them into. They issued orders or lack of orders based upon the corner I painted them into. They didn't realize that I had outflanked them and outsmarted them. Instead, they fell back on their own ego because their interpretation of the power structure was looking down, seeing a black robe, and thinking to themselves that they have absolute power. Sorry, Your Honors, but you got played. And, well, so, again, deep dive for a different day. And so that leads me into why power dynamics are so important, and why understanding those power dynamics is so important, because that guides your behavior. Using court as an example again, what do most parents do when they go into family court? If they're unrepresented, they are guided by their emotions, which makes perfect sense because it's your kid. What the court is doing is damaging your kid and your family. It is highly traumatic. The courts, as a basic proposition, do not give the deference or recognize the impact and importance of what they're doing, and how a negligent attitude can be extremely damaging. In my case, for instance, the damage to our almost 16-year-old son is incalculable, because his mother her behavior has been so unchecked that it has empowered her over and over and over again, and it has caused near irreparable damage, or damage to our son that will take probably a decade or more for him to overcome. And that's assuming he gets to the point where he seeks to overcome it. The damage the courts have caused is out of this world. You will routinely hear, if you're in family court, you may get a lecture from a judge who believes they're well-meaning, where they will say, hey, to the parents, hey, you two loved each other at some point. This fighting is causing so much damage. And the judge will completely ignore the fact that there is a third party causing an equal amount of damage, and that's the judge. The judge who refuses to curtail abusive behavior. A judge who refuses to acknowledge that being brought to court every 3 weeks is de facto abuse. And no matter what the facts are of the case, when a file has to be brought in a wheelbarrow, metaphorically speaking, the judge should be able to look down on the floor, see a massive file, and instinctively know there has been abuse. And the judge should be inquiring as to that. But I digress. The idea being, again, the power structure. I was able to tell off the judges because I put myself in a position of power where I could do that. I could avoid being held in contempt because I did it with expertise and precision, but I was also ready to take the consequences. So when you're, and as we go deeper into some of these analyses of individual instances, keep in the back of your head an understanding of, what's my position here? Do I have the ability to go balls to the wall? Is that the position I'm in that I can exercise? Or am I going to look like an absolute fool because I don't have that power? I'm in a weak position because, I mean, again, going back to the court example, because it's such an easy example, although we will get into how this works into business and other relationships. But in the court example, you may already have the judge predisposed against you. They routinely show their biases and then deny that they have a bias. Okay? But if you are in an inferior position because the judge is already biased against you, you going in full throttle attacking is you thinking that you have strength that you don't have. How you behave should be guided by an honest assessment of your position in that power structure and power dynamic. And your behavior should be modified to reflect that. Because the way you behave when you're in a position of strength can be a behavior, a powerful behavior. But if you're in a position of weakness, you got to dial it back potentially. You have to recognize you're in a position of weakness. And there's ways to get out of that weakness, that weak position, but you have to be consciously aware of it. You have to change your behavior. You may have to change your wardrobe. Another thing that we'll get into in a different video. So keep these things in mind as we're going through these lessons, as we're going through these videos. Keep in mind where you are in each of these scenarios. When you are in a position with your spouse, for instance, and your spouse says, do the dishes, which, first of all, any spouse who's ordering around their other spouse, don't do that, your child. But if your spouse has been doing the dishes the last 10 times, well, you're in a weak position to say no, assuming that you want to, that you value that relationship. But you're in a weaker position to say no because the other person has been picking up all of your slack. And in that scenario, if you want to do things the right way, if you want to get back to a roughly equal footing, do the dishes and do it without complaint, because you don't have that position. That is not to assert otherwise in a very simple example like that is actually going to be abuse. And if you're a decent human being and that is not what you want to accomplish, do the dishes. Police interaction. This is another area where people deeply misunderstand. Police have guns. Police have power over you. You have the Constitution. You have power over them. But at the same time, exercising that power, and we've all seen the videos online of I don't answer questions and then telling cops off, and some videos end poorly. Most videos actually end up well because the cops, I don't know, maybe they deal with it so often that they just ignore it. But you've seen these videos, right? And in circumstances like that, the power structure is very complicated because of the fact that they have a gun, of the fact that you have the Constitution, of the fact that the wild card scenario, what you don't know in that situation is the police officer in that case one that will honor the Constitution or one that won't, and you have to be ready to accept those consequences. God, I hate to say this, but part of your power position may be the color of your skin. It may be the Marines sticker on your back windshield. I've seen cases where someone gets pulled over for a minor traffic infraction. The police officer sees that sticker for the Marines, understanding the driver is either a vet or related to a vet, and they get let go, while many of the rest of us don't, or certain people of certain skin color won't. These are realities, and they're realities that instead of responding from pure raw emotion, which is almost always going to be bad for you, modify your behavior. Get in the habit of taking a more analytical approach to situations where you are trying to get something out of that. So if you're trying to win in court, if you're trying to not get arrested, if you're trying to keep a marriage together, dial back the emotion and try to recognize first, from an analytical perspective, where you are in that relationship, what you can do, how you should behave to improve your position, or in certain circumstances, just let the other person improve their position. Again, discussion for a different day. So anyway, that's kind of your primer on power and how that can affect some basic relationships. We'll go deeper into it as it relates to specific scenarios in later videos. So signing off, this is Peter Breaks the Box. God, I hate this. But if you start to like what you see, please hit that subscribe button. I'm probably gonna not say that too often because it irritates me so much. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. Talk to you soon.